Should we stop or just keep going with the one line? Or
we'll just keep going. It'll be fine.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be saying something like somehow important, and then it'll.
Well, I mean, I think that's interesting that but you're telling these big fucking stories, these really long.
Yeah. Because I'm lazy. Weirdly enough,
I don't think
you get to be lazy issue to issue when you're telling a big story. I mean, it seems like it's more work.
But what is that?
If you think about it.
But how does that relate to growing up on Image Comics, where one issue doesn't even carry over to the fucking next half?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that came from. I mean, some of my favorite comics growing up were, Peter David's Hulk. That's a pretty big run. The Keown issues, especially. But my favorite comic ever is Savage Dragon. So I think that's where it comes from.
Well, yeah.
Larson was the guy that was like, you're going to read 80 issues of this thing, and it's going to tell you an epic story of, Dragon's life, and then it's going to keep going from there. So I think reading that month in and month out, and that was the Image book that came out most regularly.
Yeah.
That was. I came into comics just wanting to do my Savage Dragon. I even wanted to draw when I first started out, but then I came to the sad realization that Robert Kirkman ain't so good.
I heard that only 3 people have seen that comic.
It's more than 3 people, but the number of people that have seen that comic is not growing.
Well, it's more than 3 people, but it's now 50 blind people.
Yeah.
You have all their eyes in a jar in this house somewhere.
But there was an Extreme comic called Operation Night Strike, which I think was part of Extreme Destroyer. And
these are not words.
This is Operation Night Strike. You guys can look it up. It's Operation Night Strike #1. And it was drawn in a weekend by 13 artists at the Extreme Studios office.
Okay.
And it has pages that are inked thumbnails. It's a total mess. And when I drew my comic, Between the Ropes, that no one will ever see, I had that comic thumbtacked to the wall over my desk because it was one of the worst comics that's ever been drawn. I feel bad saying that, but literally it was 12 great artists drawing 6 pages in an hour to get the thing out. So I would pull that down and flip through it every now and then. I'd be like, no, my page is better than that. Okay, it's better than that. It's good. And I gave myself a month to draw the comic. And so every day I would come home from work and work for a couple of hours, and I would just bang a page out. And so it's an absolutely embarrassing, terrible comic. It was drawn by an unprofessional artist in a rush, looking at a bad comic to convince himself that his pages were better.
Buddy, I bet it's amazing.
No, it's. What do you mean?
But I bet it's still amazing.
Terrible. I also hit a point where I was like, okay, for these pages, I'm not going to draw backgrounds. I'm going to go back and I'm going to draw backgrounds later. Because I wasn't getting pages done in time, and so I would just draw. It's just figures on white space. How old were you? I was 20. Yeah, I think I was 20.
You already felt the clock ticking. You were like, I gotta fucking get this out, man.
I don't know. I don't know why. I always had that sense of I don't know. I had this sense of if I don't get it done, I'm never going to get it done.
Yeah.
So I was like, if I don't get this done in a month, I'm never going to finish it. And so yeah.
That's real, man. I fucking. My problem is that I think I was afraid to really, I don't know. So I started showing my stuff around Heroes when I was about 12. I tell this McFarlane story all the time, so I probably won't repeat it on this, but I showed Todd my portfolio when I was 12, and he told my dad,
I've heard this story. You have told this story.
Yeah, so yeah.
Between Todd McFarlane told your dad you were going to be great.
Between that and then
hey, Todd McFarlane was right. You are great.
Oh, I thought you were going to go a different direction with that.
No, you're fantastic.
You zagged when I thought you were going to
sorry, I didn't mean to be sincere. Draw faster.
Well, that's the right for now.
There we go. But no, I don't know. We'll get this on film, but I remember 4 Seats Left, Jason Latour, and your evolution over, you've turned into one of the best artists in comics.
Thanks,
your art is fucking amazing.
Thank you, man.
There are a few comic book artists I enjoy looking at more than your work.
Well, that's weird. It's funny that we've known each other as long as we have. We have only recently got to know each other a little better.
Sure,
but we've been aware of and taught for here and there for a long time.
Yeah, many years of my southern brother, and then giving each other hugs at cons.
I have a whole alternate reality where I've said no to your projects enough that my brains are like now smeared on walls. I think about that all the time. I got like incredibly fortunate that like shit worked out. Like the list of people that I could be like, you know, what have I done with my life?
Well, clearly you made the right decision.
Did I? I mean, like for me, I think for me, it's the same thing as you drawing that comic at 20, where I was just kind of like, it's not about the other person. It's about like, there's some shit in me that I have to get out.
Yeah.
And I often don't know how to get it out yet, but I just know that if I don't work in the direction of getting it out, it'll kill me. Like it'll eat me up inside. When I was young, it was bad. Like when I was young, I would get in the shower sometimes and just could almost like feel my skin burning from the need to like do something with my life. You know, something.
I think we both have that. Like I had that real bad. Like I used to lay I've told this in some podcasts and stuff, but I don't talk about it a lot. But like I used to lay on the floor and shake.
Really?
Like, I would just like lay face down on the floor and just be like, I can't. I'm not doing enough. I'm not going to make it. I'm not doing enough. Well, it's like it was just like a weight over me, like every day that I wasn't like accomplishing something.
When did it go away?
When I started accomplishing more.
Yeah. For me, it was kind of the opposite. I realized.
Is it getting worse as the years go on?
No, it was like I'm afforded all these sort of, abilities to take chances.
Yeah.
And if I don't put my best self forward, then I'm not only like shorting myself, but I'm basically like pissing on the shoes of every person that has it harder. And that, that's why it took me, or part of what I like to tell myself, that's why it took me so long to actually like get my shit together. Because I just felt this tremendous pressure, like on every page to be like, well, this is not great. This is good, but it's not great. And then I finally realized, like, great's out of my hands. Like what you were saying earlier. Yeah. It's like, it's not really up to me as if it's great or not. All I know is I can control my effort. And if my effort's good, then there's more times than not. And my effort, my passion are there, then more times than not, the person reading it will respond to that, even if it's janky or wobbly. And that's freed me to be more ambitious. And like, I look at stuff that I used to think, like, I nailed this.
Yeah.
And it's still okay. Like, it's still pretty good. But like, sometimes it's like not, it doesn't have that free spirited, like, you're trying something to it.
Yeah. That really shows in your work. I mean,
Thanks.
I don't want to continue complimenting you on video, but there are artists who you can tell from their work are very confident in how good their work is and are not trying new things and are not pushing themselves, and their art is good here, and then 10 years later it's still good, but it's pretty much the same. And the fact that your art is continuing to evolve, and I mean, honestly, that Silver Surfer thing, like it's reaching a level of polish that you're just like, oh my God.
Thanks,
but when you see that evolution in an artist, like that shows that they're, maybe second guessing themselves and maybe a little bit unclear on how good they are, like to a detriment, but they're trying new things and fighting to constantly evolve, and it really comes through in the work.
Thanks, man.
It's great.
That's, I think that's the commonality. One of the things I'm learning as I talk to different people on this is like, I think a lot of times, this is a weird theory because there's a lot of great artists that come from big cities, but I think coming from sort of like a place where you're unsure of what art even is gives you this weird sort of like exploratory, we're always, I mean, I'm sure this is like this for you too, to some extent. Like, it's not like in Kentucky they had like the Louvre down the street, right?
Nope.
I always make the case that like, I bet it is like hell to grow up in Paris and like, you're like, I have this thought.
Oh, yeah.
And then you turn the corner and there's a painting that's like, I will never express this thought better than the statue,
Yeah. No, you kind of, in Paris, you're growing up around all this stuff that's always there. And in Kentucky, you're like, I'm going to try this, and no one's ever done this before.
Right.
And if I come from here and do this, it'll be really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like
I'll use the color orange. I've never seen orange before.
Right. Yeah. It's like it's a lot like, I'll be the I'll be the tallest Smurf. I'm gonna be the indoor Smurf.
Yeah, no, that's what we are. We're tall
It is.
Smurfs.
We are tall Smurfs. But like the whole idea of like, you know, reverse engineering shit. Like, you know, again, we also grew up in an era where like there was no Netflix.
Yeah.
There's no like great movies on demand.
No, I've explained to my kids one time, like, so when I wanted to watch a TV show, I had to like look at a calendar and find out when that show came on.
Right.
And then I had to watch my watch and go, okay, 45 minutes. I got to make sure I turn this box on in my house that's going to show me this thing once, and then I'm never going to get to watch it again.
Right. Yeah, you would.
And they're just like, what?
Like when we were kids and we used to try and watch Cinemax, like Skinemax stuff. Sure. It was like that was Daredevil porn. It's just like fuzz that makes the outline.
With a scrambled image, and then every now and then it would like for a couple of seconds it would like pop to where it was the image but green, and you'd be like, oh my god, I can see it.
And you would have to just file it away so that you would have it later. But like for me, like I'm always like, I reverse engineered what I think is good, because I just watched so much shit that I finally figured out, like, oh, what do I not like about that? Okay, don't do that. What do I not like about that? Okay, don't do that.
What's that? There's this horror movie called House.
I love that movie.
So I have only seen it once, and I saw it because my parents rented it from a video store, and then they were watching it in our living room, and I snuck downstairs and hid behind their couch and watched it over their shoulders when I was like 8 or 10 or however old. And that's the only time I've ever seen it. So to me, that movie is the scariest movie ever made.
Oh, yeah.
But I know deep down that it is probably not that great, and it's probably not that scary if I were to watch it again. But I purposefully never watch it again because the memories of those things that
lives
I've seen
in your mind is it's like Dark Side. The fear, like, well, I don't need to know what the anti-life equation is.
Yeah.
It's just scary.
I just know it's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. You talk about like shaking and like being overcome with whatever.
Sure. I try to talk about it as little as possible. But yeah, that's
I'm going to make the camera.
That's a thing that happened. Well, I didn't go to college, and my dad was a small business owner when I grew up. And so, you know, I kind of grew up like, oh, I'm never going to live up to that guy. That guy like owned his own sheet metal fabrication business and made his own ductwork. And, you know, like we would drive by factories in Kentucky, and he'd be like, yeah, put all that up there. And I'd be like, oh, wow, that's awesome. So I grew up with a sense of like, my dad set me down when I was very young and was like, you know, your grandfather was a maintenance guy at a school system in Florida, you know, and now I own my own business, and the way America works is the father is supposed to do better than the son. And so, you know, I had to work really hard to, you know, have a better job than my father, and I want you to work very hard to have a better job than me. And so there was a lot of pressure put on me to succeed. And yet at the same time, I barely got through high school. So I knew that, you know, I knew that I wasn't great at going to school. Like I wasn't great at sitting in a classroom and paying attention and taking tests and things like that. And so I just didn't go to college at all. And so, you know, 19, 20, like I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I, you know, had to do something or I was going to be a failure. And so yeah, I would get freaked out. Like, you know, a month went by, I haven't done anything. Like I was working 2 jobs at the time, but it was just like menial, you know, everyday jobs, you know, so I had a lot of pressure to try and do things.
Did you write back then?
Well, what I wanted to do was be a writer artist. So I drew, you know, from high school on, like I had reams and reams of, you know, paper from where I was, you know, designing characters and creating concepts. And I did this book called Capes with Mark Engler. And I think it had like 60 or so different superheroes like in that book. And those were all the superheroes I had like come up with and designed when I was in high school. So I would just send Mark like drawings like this guy. And so that was a lot of stuff that I would do. And I worked at a comic shop and I loved comics. I had wanted to do comics ever since I, you know, noticed the credits in a comic and was like, oh, these are made by people.
Yep.
Look at this list of people.
Yep.
This must be their job. And as much
it's
as
weird to me when people don't read the credits.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. No, I had a guy at my panel this Comic-Con who got up to the line to ask me a question. It was like, so what's it like drawing Walking Dead? And I was like, I don't draw Walking Dead. And he was like, what? He was like surprised.
You got the Stan Lee thing now where people think Stan Lee drew Spider-Man or whatever, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's still good.
So you worked at a comic shop?
But yeah, I worked in a comic shop. I always had wanted to do comics. You know, I at a certain point, I just decided, you know, well, I'm just going to take the plunge and see if this works out. I knew that wrestling was popular, so that's why I did that Between the Ropes wrestling comic.
But you didn't like wrestling.
I loved wrestling as a kid, but I didn't like wrestling anymore. I had kind of grown out of it. I thought it was silly, but because it was so popular, I was like, oh, you know, this will get some notice. You know, like this will you know, bring some attention to me, who has, you know, no reputation and no fan base. So I was working on that, and then at the same time was when I came up with the idea for Battle Pope. Mm-hmm. And Battle Pope,
my first published work.
Yeah, mine too. But the thing with Battle Pope was, you know, this has got to be so controversial and so crazy that, you know, if people see it in a catalog, they'll buy it. So that was, the whole book was designed just to, you know, get that Million Moms Coalition to help publicize it. And we never got enough notice to actually bring that about, which was always upsetting.
You don't have to cop to this or I'll cut it or whatever, but I always heard you like racked up crazy credit card debt doing all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I the way I lived, because I had to quit after like a year or so of doing Battle Pope, I quit my day job because I was like, I got to focus, you know, I got to focus 100% on Battle Pope or I'm not going to make it. And the way I did it was I would do an issue, and the issue would cost like $2,500 to print, but it would make like $3,000.
Right.
And so I would split, or I would give $500 to Tony Moore, who drew most of the issues, or whoever drew the issue. So like that was the profit. So I would just give that to the artist, and then I would put the printing bill on a credit card. Yeah. And then I would keep the other $2,500. Yeah. And so, I racked up like $50,000 in credit card debt, like over the course of, you know, doing the 13
years. That was ballsy.
It was stupid. Well, I mean, okay, on one hand, it's like, yeah, I was $50,000 in debt and I had no income whatsoever. I had no idea what I was going to do. At the same time, like, that's what everybody that goes to college does.
Yes.
So I didn't go to college. True. I didn't have student loan.
I didn't think about it like that.
So it was essentially just student loan debt. But at the time, I was like, I've done this thing. I mean, that was another reason for the, you know, shaking in the floor, because my career wasn't necessarily taking off. I had racked up, you know, more debt than I thought was even possible. I would do the math on my credit card statements, and it would be like, you know, here's your minimum payment of like $80, because I had like 17 credit cards or something at the time. And so I'd have like a $17 bill and a $25 bill and an $80 bill, and it would all add up to, I think it all added up to like $800 or $1,200 or something a month that I had to pay just to make the minimum payments. And I was like, I have to make a minimum of this much every month for the rest of my life just to pay the minimum payments, which is never going to pay off this debt. And so that's what I thought my future was that I was always going to have this little nut that I had to pay to, you know, pay for my comic book career.
Man, I always say that people that do this shit, I had like there was about 6 months of my life where I gambled too much.
No, that sounds like fun.
And it was weird. I didn't have a lot of money.
Okay.
I had like $3,000 or something to my name.
Yeah.
And 6 months, I was like, this $3,000 is fucking driving me insane. Because like, it's enough for me to keep doing the shit that I'm doing that I don't like. And eventually I just realized, like, this is not a way to live. Like, I'm going to fucking, you know, die of a heart attack. But I think comics have a similar, like, people chase. They chase that.
I mean, my career with creator-owned comics is very much like playing the lottery. It's very much like gambling. I mean, I, you know, went $50,000 in debt and then made all that back and then some.
Well, I understand I mean, I think everyone does it. I think fans do it. I think you get a buzz from Savage Dragon or Walking Dead or whatever, and then let's say you don't like the next 50 issues or whatever, but you just keep buying it because you're like, the day that I miss it, it's gonna be when it's fucking awesome again.
Yeah, that's gambling.
Like, but creators do it and nobody talks about it. Like, we're like all chasing this, like, you know, those moments of like, it all came together. I feel good about it. People liked it. It made a little bit of money. And if you have that happen once, I think you will chase that until it kills you in a lot of cases.
Oh, jeez, it's getting real heavy.
I told you I'd depress you before this was over.
My God.